It gets a bad rap because we see a lot of negative symptoms from it, but it actually has purpose in our bodies.
What are histamines?
Histamine is actually a biogenic amine. So when you think of it, you think of allergies, but it's so much more than that, really. And so when your immune system detects an allergen or an invader, histamine is actually released primarily from your mast cells and your basophils as part of your immune response. So it's a part of your immune system. It actually increases permeability of blood vessels, so it allows our immune cells to reach the affected area more quickly. It gets a bad rap because we see a lot of negative symptoms from it, but it actually has purpose in our body. So it helps with immune defense. It helps protect us against those pathogens. It creates an inflammatory response. So it actually recruits immune cells to the site of infection or injury. It actually helps regulate gastric acid secretion. So it's a part of digestion. There's neurotransmitter activity. So it's involved in our wakefulness, our alertness, our cognitive function, our brain function. It aids in wound healing, like we said, allergic responses. It bronchoconstriction so that things can't get into the lungs that shouldn't be there. So histamine actually plays a crucial role in the inflammatory process, and it recruits immune cells to the site of infection. The problem happens when it's excessive or poorly regulated. It can contribute to this chronic inflammation. We need it to turn on when we need it, but we need it to turn off so that we're not feeling these symptoms and this level of chronic inflammation.
Inflammation, we hear this word, and all diseases we say are linked to inflammation. Inflammation is our protection. It's when something needs to be dealt with or managed, our body is responding, right? And then the problem is when it becomes chronic, when it doesn't turn off. That's where the issues are. And so histamine is necessary. We want it to happen when it should and then turn off when we need it.
Exactly. So I like to use the analogy of a bathtub. If you're filling a bathtub and it's not plugged, the water's coming in, it's flowing through. So it's never going to overflow. If one of two things happen, either if it gets plugged or if we turn the water up way too high and it can't drain as fast, or both happen, you're going to start to see this overflow and you're going to start to see histamine symptoms. And we'll get into what they are because they're actually all over the body. We need to be able to process histamine in our body. So we break down histamine in two different ways. We have diamine oxidase, so that lives in the mucosal layer of our gut lining, and we have histamine and methyltransferase. So we have to methylate histamine, and that's in our cells. So if we start to get dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of bacteria, if we start to get this change in our microbiome, we start to compromise the diamine oxidase enzyme. So then if you eat something that has histamine, it's not going to break down well. I'd like to use lactose as an example because a lot of people know about lactose intolerance. So if someone has lactose intolerance and they drink milk, sometimes they take a lactate to help them digest the milk. So we can take actually a supplement with diamine oxidase enzyme sometimes to help us break down the histamine. We can stop being able to break down histamine when we start to get imbalances in our microbiome, which we can dive into. And then we have to look at what's filling the bucket, what's filling the bathtub. We need to say, okay, do you have allergies? Do you have hypersensitive mast cells that are releasing histamine too often? Do you have histamine producing or mast cell activating bacteria in your gut? A lot of people don't even know that's possible. Your bacteria can cause histamine increases. We have to look at all of these things and really look at them both ways to get your body back into balance so you stop having symptoms.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we look at these things?
Before we get into that, I just do want to go through a quick list of what the symptoms are because I think you'll be surprised. We think of like nasal congestion, sneezing, asthma, some of those things as histamine symptoms, but we also see headaches and migraines. We see fatigue, heart palpitations, dizziness, anxiety is a really big one because we have histamine receptors all over our body, difficulty concentrating, PMS, irregular periods, flushing, joint pain, sleep disturbances, high and low blood pressure, rashes, hives. We're seeing this really as a full body issue because we have 4 different types of these histamine receptors and they're all over our body. Let's break it down to short term and long term.
Okay, wait, before you go there, the women that I work with that have osteoporosis, and what I'm noticing in my population, because I run stool labs and I look at gut health, I really tell everyone that you cannot have healthy bones without a healthy gut. I mean, you can't have a lot of things without a healthy gut, right? You just brought up anxiety, and I know you had a whole list of symptoms, and And when we talk about symptoms, it's like the chicken or the egg, because there's a lot of different things that could lead to symptomology. But that whole thing about anxiety, I'm seeing that a lot. I'm seeing women with deeper gut issues, I'm going to say. Maybe this goes into where it's like longer term or deeper. I see that anxiety piece, especially around food.
That was what the first thing I was going to get into with the short term. So we have certain foods that are filled with histamines, and they're healthy foods. And actually, this is another layer, because they're also things that if you're doing traditional gut protocols, things like fermented foods, bone broth, those are often what we're using for gut healing protocols. But if you have histamine intolerance, that is actually going to backfire for you. You could be reacting to those foods. You can reduce things like aged cheeses, fermented foods, cured meat, alcohol. We have histamine liberating foods, which are things like strawberries, tomato, banana, DAO, enzymes, and even, this is a tricky one, leftovers can be a problem because histamines can actually grow. So if you cook meat and then it's sitting in your refrigerator, meal prep, a lot of people like to meal prep. That's great for some people, but that could be an issue for you if you have histamine intolerance, because the histamine can grow in food. So when you're looking at this as far as diet and we're bringing these down, sometimes you'll see your symptoms go down. So I have a 25-page free guide that really dives into a lot of this, and I can share that with you so people can see that and really get more detail in the foods that we're looking at. But sometimes we can pull them down temporarily and see, okay, do I have less symptoms? Do I feel different? And that can just be one place to start to see if histamine is actually an issue with your food.
Yeah, that's important, because you're right. With a traditional protocol for gut healing, bone broth is going to help with leaky gut. It's going to bring in the nutrients to heal the gut lining. And then the fermented foods are there to support the beneficial gut microbes. And when I run stool labs on women, I so often see imbalance in the gut bacteria. And especially when Bacteroidetes, one of those species, is low, usually we bring in some foods to feed that species. Then you also see the other component, the firmicutes. Do you call it firmicutes or firmicutes?
I usually call them firmicutes.
Yeah, so the firmicutes or firmicutes, I've heard both. In that species, if it's elevated, we have to be careful. So that's why this gets really tricky. This is what gets really hard. This is where you need to work with a practitioner that knows this. And especially if they have histamines, they need to come to you, because you might go and take a gut healing product that actually might exacerbate your symptoms and make them worse. If you enjoyed this clip from Stronger Bones Lifestyle, be sure to check out the next video or dive into the full podcast episode. Before you go, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.